Yeah, family, y'all. Just keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight. Oh, right. Yeah. Here we go, That's right.
We are family.
We are
Brothers and my sisters with me.
my sisters.
We are family.
We are family.
Get up, everybody, and sing. We are family.
We are family.
Brothers and my sisters with me. We are family.
Get up, everybody, and sing.
Everyone can see we're together as we walk down by.
And we flock just like birds of a feather.
I won't tell no lie. All of the people around us, they say, hey, can they be that close? Yeah. Just let me stay for the record. We're giving love in a friendly dose.
We are family.
Brothers and my sisters with me.
Brothers and my sisters with me.
We are family.
We are family. We are.
Get up, everybody, and sing. Get up, get up. We are family. Brothers and my sisters with me. We are family.
We are family.
Get up, everybody.
Wow, that was pretty cool. Well, first of all, we had two amazing songs back to back there, didn't we? Thank you so much to Ian and Haven for singing There Was Jesus. What a great song. And that's We Are Family. You know that song. That version of it, I think, was recorded just after 9/11. Pretty cool. Not exactly sure what David Hasselhoff is doing in that, but whatever. And you are all singing along with it because we all know that song, 1979. 1979, disco. Right after that period of music came punk, and then right after punk came new wave, and then right after new wave came the Police to kind of get things right again. The band The Police came. But you all know that song. You know why it's such a great song? It's a great tune, great to dance to, but it's the message of the song. I mean, even in that video, there's just all these people that are obviously just different in different ways. They're not all the same, but yet in some way they are all the same because they're all singing this song about family that seems to include everyone, even David Hasselhoff. What is it that makes a family? What a great question. It's a huge question because depending on the way we answer it, or the way we answer it affects the way we treat people. Like, for instance, vaccine distribution. There are nations in the world who have all the vaccines they need, and they're just hoarding vaccines because what they say is, look, we're family in this country. If you're not in this country, you're not family. Ergo, we're not sharing the vaccine. How we answer the question, what is family, has everything to do with how we live. I mean, even just here in this community, we as a church ask that question, who's our family? Because if we see someone who we're not related to in any way, what motive do we have for helping them? If we are related to them in some way, like if that's how we perceive this person, then we're going to do a lot to help them. It's such an important question to ask. What makes family? What does make family? And in COVID times, when only small groups of people can gather, if we do consider people around us to be family, how do we keep connected with them? Like, how do we do that? We phone, we drop cards off, we do live streams, we do Zoom meetings. What makes family? If you sat in a circle with 6 or 7 or 8 other people and talked about that, that would be a great discussion. What makes family? Talk amongst yourselves. We talk about family all the time here. We talk about how it's just such a basic human need, and it doesn't matter what tradition you're from, doesn't matter what background, doesn't matter if you're man or woman, rich or poor. Everybody needs to belong to some kind of group. The word now people use is tribe. We need to belong to some kind of tribe because we need to know that the people around us somehow, in some way, know us and have our backs. Somebody's got to have your back. Somebody's got to have my back. So what is it that makes that family? My all-time favorite family ever, which is kind of weird to say considering this family isn't actually real, is from a TV show called All in the Family. I don't know if you're a certain age, you'll remember. There they are there. There's the crew. The patriarch, Archie Bunker, homophobic, chauvinistic, racist, working stiff, anti-Semitic, cigar-chewing emblem of everything wrong with America, and Edith, his wife, long-suffering, loyal to the end. Do you know what? We loved that show. And in fact, people pointed to that show and said, that's a lot like my family is. That's one reason we liked it. But I think the other reason that show was so popular is because no matter how dysfunctional they all were, they stayed together. Even despite their imperfections and the dysfunctions in that family, they actually stayed together and they were there for each other. What makes family? The whole hip-hop movement comes out of a need for family. And I saw this great documentary. I don't know that much about hip-hop and rap, but Jay-Z, these are rap artists, Jay-Z, Eminem, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, their stories are also similar. Like they all were raised with no father in the projects, no father, no hope. No father, no hope. It's amazing, like the similarities in their stories. So one of them, LL Cool J, he said this, or a rapper, LL Cool J. He said this, my father was gone before I was born. He came back once, and with my own eyes, I saw him shoot my mother and my grandfather. My mother recovered well enough to work 3 jobs to see us through. I went to the streets, and my boys on the streets became my family. Why? Because they knew me. They were there for me. They helped me. They had my back. And he said, dangerous places in the dark streets of Philadelphia. But those people, they were my family. They walked and talked like I did. It's the only family I ever had. It's the only family I ever needed. What is it that makes family? Family comes in all kinds of different forms. As Canadians, we're family. Whenever we hear anything Canadian, our hearts just grow. If you're over 60 years old, here's an example. One name, Paul Henderson, Canadian. If you're under 60 years old, here's another name, Gord Downey, Canadian. Isn't it great to be in the Canadian family? That's just who we are. And it's true. We talk about church being family. I remember when I joined a church in London, Ontario, my home church, still is my home church, Oak Ridge Presbyterian Church. And I remember on that Sunday I joined, we all came to the front, and the minister, Terry Ingram and Peter Coots, were both there, and they shook my hand. They extended what they called the right hand of fellowship. And I remember they shook my hand and they said, welcome to the family. I'll never forget that. Because at that time, I needed family. I was a single parent. I was struggling in different ways. And when they said, welcome to the family, it meant a lot to me because I needed someone to watch my back and to help me and to walk with me. Someone who knew who I was and where I came from. What does it mean to be in this family of faith that we call church? You know, one thing the Bible makes so clear, and I just love this. I love it because it's just so honest. All through the Bible, beginning in Genesis, the family of God and the Christian family is not about people being righteous and perfect all the time. There are imperfect and unrighteous families all through the Bible. It's like sibling rivalry, selfish behavior, misunderstanding, dishonesty. And the Bible doesn't rejoice in any of that. The Bible doesn't rejoice in dishonesty and sibling rivalry, but the Bible is just honest about it. Like it starts in Genesis chapter 1 with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve is the very first family in the Bible. And then when something goes wrong, they point at each other and blame each other for the fall. And then the next family is Cain and Abel. Well, Cain is jealous of Abel, so Cain kills Abel. They're brothers. Cain kills Abel. And then God comes and says, "Where's your brother Abel?" And Cain says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And God was upset about that. That's the second family recorded in the Bible. Why didn't they just leave that stuff out? And then a couple generations later, it's Jacob and Esau. They were brothers. They never got along until they were both had long white beards way later in their lives. They never got along. And then Joseph, the one who had the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. His brothers threw him in a hole because they were jealous of him. It's like a soap opera. And sometimes you wonder why the writers of the Bible didn't just leave all that stuff out. But it's important to know. The disciples of Jesus, same thing. Far from being perfect people. They were sort of jealous of each other. They argued all the time. And at the end, they denied knowing Jesus. And so what becomes clear is it's not about us being righteous and perfect to belong to the family. It's about how God works even through our unrighteousness and even through our imperfections and molds us into family. That's why all those stories of families that are a lot more like Archie Bunker than they are like Leave It to Beaver. That's why those stories are in the Bible. So that we can see that we don't need to be perfect to belong to the family. That God will take us and help us and mold us. Because at the end of the Old Testament comes the Messiah. Like Jesus comes out of all that dysfunction and unrighteousness. God says, "I know that you are far from perfect." That's why Jesus hung out with sinners, which drove all the holier-than-thou religious leaders crazy. I know you're far from perfect, but there is a common bond that you will have that will keep you together as family. And so Jesus gives us a new definition for the word family. And this is about the common bond. Jesus has a habit of redefining words for us. There's all kinds of words we think we know the meaning of, and then Jesus comes along and redefines them. For instance, the word power. We think we know what the word power means. Power means social status, standing in the community, money, career. That's what power is. Jesus says that's not what power is. Power is being able to forgive someone who's hurt you, and power is loving your neighbor. A whole different understanding of the word. Or Jesus does it for the word happiness. We think happy are those who have everything they want and everything they need and have everything that just fills them up. And Jesus says that's not happiness. Jesus says happy are those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, for they will be filled. There's a whole different definition for the word happiness. And so now Jesus gives us this new definition for the word family. This is what Ashley read from Mark 3. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. And standing outside, just picture this in your mind. It's just like there are stories in the Bible that are kind of designed to make you smile. I mean, there's a teaching element, but don't be afraid to just smile at stories. There's this crowd sitting around Jesus in this house. And they told him, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." And Jesus says this. He says, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And they're like, not sure how we need to answer. Captain Obvious, Jesus, like it's a trick question. Okay, I know it's a trick question, but we're going to answer it anyway. Your mothers and brothers are standing outside the house and they're knocking on the door and they want to get in. And then Jesus says, "Not quite." And they're like, "Oh, he's going to do it again. He's going to redefine a word. He's going to redefine a word." Okay, go ahead, Jesus, because I thought I knew what family meant. Now I see that I don't, so go ahead. And so Jesus is in this house, and he's teaching, and the story says there's so many people in that room where Jesus is teaching that they didn't get time to eat. They actually went in to eat. They didn't get time to eat. And then someone taps Jesus on the shoulder and says, your mother and brothers are knocking on the door. Sorry to interrupt. Who is my mother and my brother? And you can just picture them standing outside. It's us. Jesus is such, come on, let us in. Come on, what, really? It seems like he's dissing his family. Look, he's not dissing his family. He's not brushing them off at all. First of all, Jesus had a wonderful relationship with his mother. And we know that because his mother was one of the few people that was with Jesus as he hung on the cross. Jesus' mother. I mean, they were very close, Jesus and his mother. Jesus and his brother James were close. James became one of the founders, along with Peter, of the early church. James wrote a letter that's now in our New Testament. In asking this question, who are my mother and brothers, Jesus is just making a really simple point that family is not just about blood anymore. Family is going to be so much bigger than just blood. Okay, Jesus, so what's family? I thought I knew. I guess I don't. Sometimes I think I know a word, and then you redefine it, so I'm kind of used to it by now. And so here Jesus gives a surprising answer. It's just one simple verse in that passage. What makes family? Here's what Jesus says. I find this really interesting, because now it's not going to include just his blood, but anyone, Gentile or Jew, man or woman, slave or free. Here's the criteria. Here's the only condition. To who belongs to the family? In one simple sentence. Whoever does God's will is my brother, my sister, my mother. Whoever does God's will. This is so interesting. Listen, there is the believing and then there is the doing. Because Jesus doesn't say whoever believes in God's will. Jesus says whoever does God's will. The faith part is really important. We say the Apostles' Creed. I believe that Jesus is the Son. I believe in the resurrection. I believe in the Holy Catholic Church. The believing is really important, but now Jesus says, here's the doing. And if you want to be a part of this family, you need to do God's will. It's the first and it's the most important house rule in this family of Jesus. It's a house rule. Whoever does the will of God. You have house rules in your family. Take your shoes off before you come into the house. That's a house rule you have in your family. After you're finished eating, don't just put the dish in the sink with food still in it. Clean out the dish, give it a rinse, then put it in the dishwasher. That's a house rule that you might have in your family. We eat together every day in our family. We don't eat in front of the TV. We eat at the table. Unless the Leafs are in the playoffs, then we might eat in front of the TV. That's a house rule in our family. You have house rules. No yelling in our house. That's a rule in our house. It's a house rule. When Jesus says, whoever does God's will, it's just a house rule for this house and for every community of Christian faith. Whoever does God's will. Well, what's the will of God? What's the will of God? And Jesus says, I'll show you. And he pulls out ancient words, because Jesus pulled out ancient words all the time. And he said, this forms the basis of everything. If you want to know what God's will, this is the basis of everything else. And it's from Genesis. And here are the words. You are blessed so that you can be a blessing to others. For Jesus, it's the will of God and it's the house rule. If you want to belong to this family, be a blessing to other people. Not so long ago, there was I was in the church building. I was alone. I occasionally end up alone in the building, a little bit more now because COVID's here. But this was a couple of years ago, and I had a couple of hours to finish up a message for that Sunday. So I'm sitting, I had the whole building to myself, which was cool. So I'm in my office and I'm just getting started, and then there's I hear the doorbell ring. We have a doorbell on the side door up in the side hall. I'm thinking, someone's here. Put my stuff down. Walk down the side hall, Walk to the door, and through the window I see a young woman with a baby stroller and a little girl standing beside her, maybe 5, 6 years old, and it's raining out, and it's miserable, and they're kind of standing there, and they're wet. And as I walk up to her, I recognize that she's one of the women that comes to the community supper that we have. I said, oh, I know her. So I went out, opened the door, come on in, come on in, it's wet and they're cold. And the little girl had the sniffles, and they come in the side, I'll close the door. I said, you're all wet. And she says, I'm just exhausted. And she looked exhausted. Her eyes were red. And she said, I'd like to do a book swap with you. And she smiled, big smile, even though she was soaking wet and exhausted. I'd like to do a book swap. Oh, really? Great. Let's do a book swap. And she handed me this package. It was like a book that was in a plastic bag. And it was soaking wet because it was raining. And I said, oh, thanks. Thank you. And I took this book out of this wet plastic bag, and it was an old, tattered paperback. And I looked at the cover, and it said, The Joy of Cooking. And she said, it's my mother's. It belonged to my mother, but I thought that the church could use it for your community suppers. Maybe get a recipe out of it. I said, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And she said, what I'd like from you is a Bible. Oh, yeah, I mean, we've got lots of Bibles in this building. I can get you a Bible. And I went into the sanctuary, this part of the church. I grabbed a Bible, went back to the side hall, gave her a Bible. And she said, you know what, the community suppers, you always do the prayer before everybody eats. I said, yeah, always. Never miss it. Do a blessing. And she said, when you do that, it always brings back so many memories. I remember when I was a little girl and my grandma used to pray. And I remember she always said after the prayer, in Jesus' name. And she said, I never really understood what that meant. And now that I'm older and now that I have a little girl, I want to know what that means. So I just wanted a Bible so that I could read it and look into that. And I said, well, it's yours to keep. And if you need any help understanding that, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. And she said, thank you. And we had done our book swap. And then she said before she left, you know that the supper that you do, it's really important to a lot of people. And she says it's so good to know that there are people in the community that care about each other. What do we need to do to belong to the family? And that woman on that wet, miserable, rainy day couldn't have put it any better than Jesus himself. She just said, we need to care about each other. We need to know when people around us are hungry. And there's stomach hunger, but there is also heart hunger. I'm going to finish with words that we've all heard this week. Words from the young poet. She proclaimed these words as she stood before presidents and pilgrims alike. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a people committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. It's worth it. Because there will be a day when you will stand at this door, and I'll stand at this door, and we'll be knocking on this door, and inside of that door will be Jesus. And Jesus will come, and he'll open that door, and that door will swing open. And he'll look at you, and he'll say, my brother, my sister, welcome home. It's good that you're joining us, as always,